Cancer. The very word is terrifying. If you're told you have cancer, the terror becomes a nightmare that never ends. My name's Frank Zaccari, and this is Life Altering Events. Today, what we're going to talk about is the unlikely gift of breast cancer. Now, according to breastcancer.org, on June 25th, 2020, 1 in 8 U.S. women, that's about 12% of the population, are going to develop invasive breast cancer over the course of her life, along with another 48,000 new cases of non-invasive breast cancer. In 2019, it was projected nearly 42 women and 500 men died from breast cancer. Now, my guest today is Diane Simard, and Diane has faced breast cancer and is not only determined to win, but she's also training healthcare professionals on how to address the psychological impact of cancer. Let me tell you something about Diane. This is one incredibly impressive woman. She is determined she's going to overcome every obstacle that life can throw at her. She is recognized by bizwomen.com as one of the 100 inaugural National Women in Business to Watch. I try to say that fast. She is an award-winning writer. She's a business strategy accelerator, a speaker, executive vice president, and board member of Aerospace in Denver. We're going to talk a little bit about Aerospace in a minute here. So after completing her treatment for stage 3 breast cancer, Diane founded the Center for Oncology Psychology Excellence, COPE, C-O-P-E, much easier to say, at the University of Denver Graduate School of Professional Psychology. Her book, The Unlikely Gift of Breast Cancer, was named one of the best breast cancer books of all time by Book Authority. So Diane, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Thank you, Frank. Frank, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Your story is just phenomenal. As I was reading your book and reading your bio and some of your blogs. So Diane, tell viewers, what was life like pre-2015? You had it all going.
Well, in 2015, I was getting ready to turn 50, which is an important part of the story. Up to that point, I am a small town girl. I was raised in a town of 80 people in Nebraska. And I had lived in Nebraska until I graduated from college. And then I lived in the Bay Area for a short time and then in Dallas, Texas. And I wanted to get to a lower humidity climate. I'll just put it that way, where the weather was not so extreme. And so I found my way to Colorado. I have a degree in journalism, actually, with a public relations emphasis, but I caught the small business bug and have worked for some early stage companies doing a variety of business writing. I realized early on that being a newspaper reporter, I just wasn't cut out for that. Business interested me way too much for that. And so in the late 1990s, I moved out to Colorado. I got married to my ex-husband. He had an information technology services company here in Denver. And so was in business with him for 5 years. And then we sold that company in 2004. And we did subsequently divorce, unfortunately. But one of the things that I did with my divorce proceeds, the company had a very successful exit. One of the things I did was to start investing in other entrepreneurs' ideas. And because he and I had learned about business really the hard way and saved a dying business. And we were on the ropes getting ready to lose everything and file bankruptcy when the .com boom and then bust happened. And so as I always say, everybody in the information technology sector was making silly money but us. But anyway, after that, I did do some investing, as I mentioned, and really wanted to get back in and dive in and work with a company. So the one that I selected is a company that I have invested in, and it's called Aerospace, BYE Aerospace, here in Denver. We're headquartered at Centennial Airport, and we're developing the E-Flyer family of all-electric airplanes. And so we're starting with a 2-seat all-electric airplane called the E-Flyer 2. We're in the process of getting that FAA certified. And so I've been here with the company for 12 and a half years. I'm on the board of director, was an early investor, and It's been, I personally am not an aviator or pilot. Airplanes are cool, but this is much like what Tesla and some of the other electric car companies have done for ground transportation. We're helping to revolutionize the aviation industry, really, to bring all the goodness that comes with the electrification of aviation, if you will. And so our target market for our first airplane to get certified, which is the two-seater, is the flight training market, to help address the commercial pilot shortage, to
Yes.
offer a much more economical alternative financially, but also just the goodness that comes with electric flight, lower noise, no emissions, and those types of things. And then also the operating costs are significantly lower as well. So things are getting really fun here now. And again, everything changed though in 2015. So I know we're going to discuss a lot about that transition and what happened to me, but you're right, Frank. Before 2015, Aerospace was moving along. We were really about 10 years, I always say 10 years before our time, really waiting for this industry, things like electric motors for aircraft and the battery energy densities to get to where we needed them to be. So in 2015, as we kind of cue up the story, that was all just beginning to come together.
Wow, that's amazing. The whole electric model for flight is going to be such an innovative and a disruptive approach into the sector. And it's exciting to watch this type of stuff occurring. So you're at the top of your game. You just told us you've got great professional success. You had remarried. You had this. Everything was going. Then you go in for your annual mammogram. Share what happened there.
Yeah, when I initially went in, I had it was a benign cyst in my left breast 10 years before I got my breast cancer diagnosis. And so I had been having annual mammograms ever since I was 40. And so it was, I figured I had dodged a bullet once. And so in 2015, when I went in for my annual mammogram, it was business as usual. And, but I did not get the results back right away as I typically did. And it was my husband, I've remarried, a wonderful man, and my husband, Rini, who reminded me that, hey, you haven't gotten your test results back. And I said, that's, it's fine. Anyway, the next day I got a phone call and I got called back because they saw something that was suspicious. And so I was called back for what's called a diagnostic mammogram and then an ultrasound. And so it was on that visit that I started to get some early signs that they were very concerned about something. And so in my book, I do describe in great detail what it's like, what it was like for me emotionally to really experience that and to watch everyone, when you're in the imaging center and other women are going in and out of mammogram rooms, nothing's wrong. And I just had this hunch, this suspicion that it was going to be my time. And it ended up that it was.
So in your book, you described this incredibly well. It was February 11, 2015 at 10:45. You received this call at work. Okay. Tell us what that moment was like.
So I had 2 biopsies the day before. They biopsied, as they call it at the time, a spot in my left breast, and then another area of concern in my left armpit. And so I was very concerned by then because I knew that if they were checking my armpit, that perhaps the breast cancer had already traveled to my armpit. And so I had the biopsies the day before, and they had told me that I would get the results in 2 days. And so having now worked around pilots and engineers and aviators for so long, I'm very data driven. And so I very much take anyone at their word. And so I was not expecting a phone call. And when I was sitting here at my desk and I looked down and I saw that it was my primary care doctor calling, again, maybe it's my journalism training, I tend to jump to conclusions and just sort of logically put things together. So I figured it was the call, and it was. And so how I felt was the movies actually that are about cancer portray this moment very well. It was reflective of how it felt for me. I felt like I was sinking, like I was traveling backwards. and like I was going to fall. I needed to fall. And um, my ears felt like they were muffled, like I had headphones on. And I think those are the initial reactions when you're in shock. And I was somewhat prepared that it could be a positive diagnosis, but there's nothing like having someone who you don't know on the other end of the line trained tell you that you've been diagnosed with cancer. And it ended up that it's my nature to not be that emotional. It's just not my nature to be emotional or to freak out. And so I was very calm, and I actually thanked the nurse who called me, and she thought she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know what? Yes, I've been trained to deal with crises. It's what I do professionally. Thank you very much. I appreciate you making the phone call." And then she started talking, and I just hung up on her and had my moment. And then, I dropped the phone, and I just couldn't believe. And I was most of all just frustrated and disappointed because I didn't have time. I didn't plan for cancer to happen. And now I've got this huge disruption in my life. And the nurse had told me that it was likely an intermediate stage because we knew it had traveled to because that lymph node in my armpit had tested positive for cancer. So at that point, then we knew I had breast cancer. It has traveled to my lymph nodes. But what we don't know is if it has metastasized throughout the rest of my body. So then after that, extensive more tests, there's just this process that you go through because now they have to figure out exactly how much cancer you have and where it's located.
Mm-hmm. What was next? Then you went through all the chemo and the
Yep.
surgeries.
Yep.
And
So I, and again, my book goes into detail. I am a very, I guess, controlling, but I started to speed read because I wanted to get smart about cancer. There's no cancer in my family. Heart disease and dementia are very prevalent, but there's no cancer, and so that's not uncommon. And so I needed to get smart right away about something I had never taken the time to learn about because I didn't think it would ever impact me.
Right.
Statistically, it shouldn't have. And so I was speed reading books just trying to get good at cancer. And perhaps other overachievers tend to react the same way. But I was also trying to mentally prepare myself for this about as extreme of treatment as they were giving for breast cancer. And this is 6 years ago now, so treatments have evolved since then. But I was my oncologist recommended that I start with chemotherapy because I had 3 breast tumors, none of which was larger than 2 centimeters. And so my tumors were very small, but they decided to stage me, which is how they treat you. They stage you. To stage me as a late stage 3 because my non-aggressive grade of cancer was behaving aggressively. So you can read a whole lot into that. And so they felt that the best course of treatment was to, again, throw everything that my poor body can handle at me. The usual chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, pretty much take you to the edge to just try to annihilate this cancer without killing you in the process. And so that's what they did. So I needed time to gear up mentally, and chemo, I was just deathly afraid to have such a weak stomach. And so a couple chapters in my book talk about that time of reflection and how I decided that I was going to make this cancer treatment a very meaningful time in my life and really absorb and experience it and not go hide under a rock. And so it was during that time I started journaling, and, which as it turns out is often a tool that's recommended for those who are comfortable capturing their thoughts in the written word. And so I started keeping a journal. And then one of the other challenges I had was notifying this large circle of friends that we have and family, of course, about what's happening to me. And there's no great way to do that. And so I, at the time, was not a fan of social media and was a very private person. And so I just kept sending out email updates. And it was those responses from our friends to the level of detail that I was sharing in those email updates about how my type of breast cancer, and there are 7 or 8, as far as I know, different types of breast cancer, how my situation differed from someone else's and why that was. And so the response to that was people were very appreciative because they said, no one talks about cancer like you do and is willing to share this level of detail. They're learning. It's a learning experience for them. So yeah, so then the chemo got started. Chemo was first, and it was very tough. I had decided to lose my hair. Back then, a strategy, if you will, called cold cap therapy, which is where you freeze your scalp to try to keep some or all of your hair. It was very new in this country, and my oncologist did not have experience with any of her patients who, only one had done it, and it was very painful for her, and she had a lot of headaches. Now, again, as I mentioned before, a lot of those technologies and treatments, cold cap therapies have improved. Again, this is 6 years ago. So, but at the time, my oncologist said she did not have any statistical data, again, data-driven person, that I had asked for to say, if I do try to preserve my hair, what are the chances are, that cancer could recur? And she said, there's no data on that. And I said, okay, and in the end, it was embarrassing, humiliating, and cathartic all at the same time. And losing your hair, it is not pleasant. And for me, it wasn't the fact that my hair was gone or felt like I was losing my femininity. It was just frightening to see yourself, and frightening to see other people's reactions, and frightening to, some people didn't want to touch me or hug me. And again, 6 years ago, pre-COVID and all of that. And so it was a real, enlightening experience in that sense. And so 5 months of chemo, I had 16 chemo infusions. I had a whopper bout of vertigo that landed me in the emergency room during chemo that had nothing, well, I wouldn't say it had nothing to do with chemo. My body was certainly compromised, my immune system, but we had a very rare wet spring here in Denver as I was going through chemo. And so the spring allergies were just horrific. And so I had the nausea was so bad, I had some acupuncture treatments. And I think that the treatments, the energy that was released all throughout my body to try to help quell the nausea actually triggered the crystals in my inner ear to break loose. And so in the middle of the night, I woke up, and again, this is all very graphically told in the book. It was the closest I feel that I came to dying throughout my whole cancer experience, was spinning, lying flat on my back and spinning from vertigo. And that phenomenon of just not being able to, stop getting sick. I was sicker physically from that than I was from any of the chemo drugs. And so that was a trip to the ER and delayed things a little bit. But I slogged through chemo, finally got done with that. And then surgery was actually up next for me. And so because my breast tumors were so small, it was not required that I have a mastectomy, believe it or not. And I was surprised by this too, because the tissue, there was a minimal amount of breast tissue that they were going to have to remove. I could have had a full single or double mastectomy. This was all on just one side, but it was not going to guarantee or even impact the chances of recurrence if I had removed my breast. So I went with what's called lumpectomy surgery, where they just remove the cancerous tissue. And so I ended up having to have 2 surgeries, which delayed everything, the healing a little bit more. And so I finally got started after all that healed with, I can't remember, it was 33 radiation treatments, I think.
Wow.
And so they zap you, and they literally did just as much radiation as I could handle. One of those, 2 of the 3 breast tumors were fairly close together. The third one was on my chest wall. And so they were radiating, probably just millimeters from my heart. And so that was the most dangerous part of the whole thing is, as I always say now, you address one problem, but who knows what other problems you've created down the road. So at the end of it all, it was 10-month treatment. And I walked out of the radiation room for the last time on December 21st of 2015. My hair had started to come back already. And unfortunately, the gray hairs first. Yeah. But it was after that time, after I finished treatment, and in 2016, I was reborn, to be honest, Frank. I emerged, and you talk about life-changing experiences. This, I did a lot of contemplating, forgiving, purging in every sense of the word. But I was determined, and I was 50 now. I was determined that the second half of my life was going to be full of joy and peace. I was at peace with myself. I had decided who, the type of people I wanted around me. And I had decided I wanted to share my story and my frustrations. And I know we're going to get into this in a bit. My frustrations with the lack of psychological care, and it's part of the cancer treatment protocol. There are support groups and care centers do what they can, but there are actually individuals who get diagnosed with PTSD, with post-traumatic stress, as a result of a cancer experience. And so I had asked my oncologist, as chemo was getting close to ending, because the cyclical nature of chemotherapy was really causing me to fall into depression.
Right.
Just, you're going to be having to go in, you're going to be sick. And I had to do that 16 times. And so I had asked my oncologist for a referral to a counselor. And she said, I don't know of anyone who specializes in working with cancer patients. Because I said, I had told her that group therapy was not for me. And I said, and I looked at her and I got a little irate. And I said, you mean to tell me that we have marriage and family counselors, we've got sports psychologists, but we don't have cancer therapists? And she said, I know they exist, I just don't know who they are. And so that launched me into a quest to really start to understand why there is not the attention paid to the mental health impact of cancer that I think that there should be. And again, we're seeing as a result of now with what has happened with COVID and the impact, the mental health impact that it has had on everyone. And I'm talking about just the impact on cancer, those who experience cancer. It's a big deal. It's traumatic. It's so traumatizing. You are faced with your mortality. And I was referring to that time before we knew how far or whether the cancer had metastasized throughout the rest of my body. And fortunately, we discovered that it had not. But I was pondering my mortality. I was preparing to only have days or weeks or months or years to live. And that was part of my rebirth and that's the unlikely gift of breast cancer, was to be given that forced really to look at your mortality and to analyze your life and to say, there's a lot more to be done. And so I just was determined to capture this in a book, which I did. And
ladies and gentlemen, if you spend any time reading anything Diane has written, I have, and you just absolutely know she's going to win. This is going to happen. Now, one of the things you wrote, Diane, is that in 2020, there are approximately 18 million cancer survivors. That's a 30% increase in a decade. Now, more people are living, which is very good, but there's no help. There's no psychological, mental health help that you could discover. So what did you do? Tell us about COPE.
Yeah, thank you. So I had several connections at the University of Denver. And I was in this depressed state, and I was just curious about why, they're shooting your body up with all these toxins to get rid of cancer and radiating you, and just why the system, and I'm not picking on any care center, it's just the system, it's the nature of our healthcare system, why we're not concerned about how traumatizing this is. And so I had some connections there at we call it DU, the University of Denver, and I was introduced to their graduate school of professional psychology, which is where they train future licensed psychologists. And that degree, their doctors, is a PsyD degree. So they're clinical psychologists as opposed to perhaps a PhD. They tend to do research and clinical work. So I met with the dean there of the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, and we had a great conversation about behavioral health in general. And I had told her that I just felt this calling to really explore more of what the time, there's many terms, psychosocial oncology, oncology, psychology. The term I use now is psycho-oncology, which is really the intersection of the impact that a cancer experience has on your mental health. And again, it's not just while you're going through treatment or just while you're waiting for treatment to start. It's living with cancer for the rest of your life and being retested, and heaven forbid if there's a recurrence. And then not just for the person themselves, for your caregivers as well. So we met, we had these meetings and just started to discuss, and come to find out there was very limited training available to, in this case, these licensed psychologists. And so I ended up funding a specialty there at DU within their Graduate School of Professional Psychology, and it's called COPE, the Center for Oncology Psychology Excellence. And we do train future licensed psychologists how to work with cancer patients. And so it's a specialty. It's a 12 credit specialty right now. And from what I can gather, I think about 100 students have taken some or all of the COPE classes. And so psycho-oncology is really emerging. And I've had several students seek me out because I have interest in this field and founded this specialty that say, I had an aunt or I had a cancer scare and I know how traumatic this is and I want to help these people. And they are choosing to, again, like there's marriage and family, there's all kinds of different business coaching. They want to help support cancer, those impacted by cancer. And so I continue to advocate, speak, write, blog, working with my alma mater, actually the University of Nebraska at Kearney, about similar training in some form or fashion. And Nebraska, of course, is a very agricultural state. And so you've got a lot of rural areas, sparsely populated areas. And so COVID has helped remind us that telehealth is so important. And so they're very much interested in my help, whatever I can do to help them establish a program that will allow this type of training so that they can have more practitioners and counselors available to those that live in very rural areas. And so I do what I can. I'm still here at Aerospace full time, but this is my life calling. And I was blessed. It was a life-changing event at the age of 50. I found my voice through this breast cancer experience. I already had the writing skills. I know a lot of people because of my experience in business, and I'm just connecting and I'm bringing folks together. And Frank, it's so great to be able to network and meet you because you're a storyteller and you're allowing us to share information about the resources that are available and the attention and the hope that we can continue to help those that are impacted by cancer and other traumatic health experiences.
Absolutely. Diane, you trademarked a statement I was reading in your book and in your blog. Now, see if I get it right here. Cancer is never invited and cancer never leaves. What are some of the lingering effects that most people don't realize about cancer?
That is something I did not expect was the lingering effects. And it's things you would never think about. And so if I can hold up my hand here, my left hand has lymphedema. You can compare it to my right hand, this hand. And so this is going to be perpetually swollen. It's called edema. And it's because I had lymph nodes removed from my left armpit when I had surgery. And I went through lymphatic massage therapy. I still do lymphatic, trying to stimulate your lymphatic system because it's compromised now. Some of the filters, some of the lymph nodes are missing. And so I continue to try to train my lymphatic system to adjust. And so, but this hand's probably going to be perpetually swollen. And so I had been wearing my wedding ring on my right hand for the longest time after I finished cancer treatment because my hand was swollen. And about 2 years after treatment ended, I decided I want to be normal again and I want to go get my wedding ring resized. And so popped into the jewelry store, got up to the front of the line at the customer service and started to explain to the delightful customer service representative that, hey, I'd like to have my wedding ring resized, And it was a very embarrassing thing because she shouted out to the whole store. She goes, "You've gone up 2 ring sizes." And everybody turned to see who the fatso was. And I very calmly explained to her, I said, I went through breast cancer 2 years ago. And I have lymphedema in my left hand. It's chronic. And I know my fingers are very swollen. And it's embarrassing to wear a size 8.5 ring. But I just want to wear my wedding ring on my left hand again. Can you help me? And she goes, "Well, that shouldn't happen." And I said, she goes, "Breast cancer doesn't cause that." So we had this little argument. And, here I am pleading and begging. And she goes, "Well, we're going to have to cut the shank. It's going to be expensive." And I go, "I just want to be normal. Can you please help me?" And she was like, "Okay, I've never had such a request." And she just was in shock that you don't have to resize your wedding ring because you had breast cancer. And she was trying not to be rude and crude, but she really was. And I was trying to calmly educate her. And so that's just one example and then the other thing that people always ask about and they're always freaked out about is just, oh my God, we thought you'd stay bald for a lifetime.
Mhm.
And I don't mean to make light of this or joke about it, but those visions, I call them the faces of cancer, the images that were portrayed, we're wearing bandanas or we're bald, it's just so frightening, and it stays with people, so that when your hair starts to grow back, and I'm letting my hair grow long because I can, and my big thing is grow it if you got it, because I'm still rebelling 6 years later, but my hair came back. It's much thicker and fuller, and yes, it's gray, so I have it colored, but it doesn't always happen that way. It just depends on who you are. You're unique, you're you, but it's shocking. People will come and they'll want to touch my hair, like, is that a wig? I'm like, nope, it's my hair. They're like, it can grow back. And I said, yeah, sometimes. Doesn't always happen that way. But just, again, I feel like I just want to be accessible for people. I had, even some of my coworkers here were concerned when we went into lockdown for COVID, that my immune system might still be compromised, that I was going to have to, stay in lockdown. And I said, I'm actually, my blood counts are better and higher than they were when I started all this. And so again, it's just, these are things that people just don't talk about or think to ask about. So it doesn't happen for everybody this way. And I hate having a size 8.5 wedding ring finger, but that's just how it is. But I'm alive. I'm so grateful to have been one of the ones chosen to live. And so I'm just, we can talk about anything that you want to ask Frank about cancer. I'll answer it.
The other thing I saw as I was reading your stuff was the ongoing testing that continues to occur that causes additional stress. One of the things you said was a biomarker CA2729.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So it's after you, or as you are, for at least my situation with my breast cancer, for the first 5 years after I finished treatment, my type of breast cancer was estrogen fed. And so, which is the type that about 80% of women who get breast cancer have the type that I had. And so the key is to shut your estrogen off so that there's not fuel for your cancer. So I was on anti-estrogen medication for 5 years, and then your medical team continues to keep a close eye on you. And so I was going back every quarter, and then it was every 6 months, and then it was every year to be retested. And one of the ways that they can try to detect, in addition to mammograms, you continue to have mammograms faithfully, of course, is that it's a controversial biomarker, and it's called this CA2729. I need to get it right too. And so it's a blood test, and it's a protein in your blood that may, if it spikes, it may be an early indication that cancer has recurred. It's very controversial. There's been a lot of false positives. Some believe in it, some don't. My oncologist was cautious about it, quite honestly. And some don't believe in it at all. So I don't have a professional opinion. This is not, but my oncologist does test that. And so a quick story of another example of the worry and the unexpected concern you can have. This was 2 summers ago. I had just had a tooth recrowned. It was a crown that had just been recrowned. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know this about teeth. The tooth didn't like it, and it rebelled, and it abscessed. And I thought it was a sinus infection, and you don't have sinuses down here. But I had convinced myself that everything was fine because I had just had this tooth fixed. Well, at the same time as that was happening, I had my 6-month oncology checkup. And so I went in, they drew blood, and I was in the throes of this tooth abscessing, and my 2729 protein spiked. And so they called me and they said, you're going to have a PET scan because we don't know what else to do. Everything else is checking out fine. But, and a PET scan that's, as you see in the movies where, if you light up like a Christmas tree and they're like, your cancer might be back. So get this, I had a PET scan for potential cancer recurrence that morning, and then I had an emergency root canal that afternoon. And as it turned out, I know. Yeah, this is the life I lead. As it turned out, I was in the chair at the endodontist in the middle of what became a 6-hour root canal, cut up, two segments anyway. And I had the comfort dog in my lap. And my husband called the endodontist office and asked them to let me know that my PET scan had come back negative. And so here I am with the rubber down in my mouth, and I find out the cancer's not back. And you know what that PET scan said? It said, you have dental disease.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, I do.
I know.
So, yeah. And so, but those are the bizarre, that's just, these things happen to me. And those are the stories to tell that you just like, wow. But that's how quickly they react. And they're like, you have to have a PET scan tomorrow because we need to know right away. Anyway, and so that had a happy ending, and I finally finished my root canal a month later. But that stuff happens. And so you talk about stress, fear of recurrence. And I had told my husband again, I'm like, Rini, I just have a feeling that this back, that I just, it's just, and it wasn't. But what I was hesitant. Had I gone to my dentist sooner and said, hey, doc, I have this excruciating pain and chugging whiskey isn't helping anymore, he could have put the kibosh on this. I wouldn't have had to go, but I'm just so darn stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
Thought I knew better. I was just a sinus infection, doc. I'm fine.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's just something that happens. It has nothing to do with cancer. Anyway,
You've passed the 5-year mark, which is supposed to be one of the major milestones. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What's next for you professionally and with Scope? You're revolutionizing aerospace, and you're revolutionizing psychological care for cancer. Where do you see that going?
Thank you. So it's been such an emotionally exhausting but thrilling ride here at Aerospace. And it's just getting good now. I mean, I'm not going away anytime soon, but we're likely on to something big here. And we knew that. We've been trying to be patient about it. And so my place in the world now, though, as I mentioned, is connecting people. It's starting initiatives. It's, okay, we have a problem. How do we solve this? And let's get together and talk about it. I was just talking with my business partner, our CEO and founder, this morning here at Aerospace about our future, and it's pretty darn exciting. And unfortunately, I can't disclose what it is. But I told him, I said, I see vision. I have this vision of this company being a legacy company, doing incredible things because we've focused on the electrification of aviation, as are others, and it's wonderful. We want everybody to be successful at this. But I said, I have this other part of my life too, which is helping entrepreneurs. That's what I did. Was I hung in there with the company through some very lean times. That's what I do, is I encourage, but I keep pushing, I keep driving. And so I said, I'm going to continue to push you, George, to do bigger things. But in the meantime, I feel like it's just part of my calling and part of the gift that I was given to have a second chance at life, to continue to have a voice, but also to be a listener and to listen to the concerns of those that go through traumatic health experiences, of which cancer is one, about how this changes you, how it is hard to get your life back after such a traumatic experience. And if your cancer in this case is treatable, how do you come to terms with who you are now, having survived this? You've changed. A lot of people are very angry and bitter about what it does to their bodies and to their minds. And can I be one of those that's just poking and prodding and trying? Ultimately, I would love nothing more than for individualized mental health therapy to be a standard part of a cancer treatment protocol. And some cancer care centers are shifting to that, and so much has happened here within the last few years, but there needs to be more of that. And so I'll continue writing about it and blogging about it and speaking about it. And legislative policy is certainly another area where we can affect change, but we need the data, the research data, and that's where my business background comes in, and just trying, talking to a couple of different groups right now about an effort to just find out what information, what research data is available on this topic to show that, and you say, well, how does this help you? Well, the theory is that when you have addressed this psychological impact of cancer, and you're able to understand the trauma and what's happened to you, perhaps people are more likely to stay on their therapies, whether that's medication or to go back for annual mammograms. Some are so traumatized, they don't want to know. They're not going back. And again, I'm not advocating for mammograms or not. That's not what this is about. This is about treating the person holistically. And I think that therapy should be a big part of that. So we're training. I'm advocating to get more training available. I'm advocating to, on the policy side, start, because remember, the brain is part of the body and often it's forgotten, but the brain is a very powerful part of the future, the ongoing process of healing and these traumatic experiences. And I always thought PTSD was just reserved for war experience. It's not at all. And I've dabbled with a little bit of that. I've had a little bit of that myself, fortunately not much, but it just catches you off guard, and just at the most unexpected times, you can have these flashbacks. There's certain pieces of Tupperware I can't use because I was so sick during chemotherapy and people were providing food in Tupperware containers. And not to pick on Tupperware, I'll just call it plasticware, but that I can't touch because I'll look at that and I will have to run to the bathroom and get sick because it triggers, that's just so strong in your brain. You visualize, you see something, and it just reminds you of this time and this place that you want nothing to do with. So
this is amazing. This is a truly amazing story, ladies and gentlemen. If you get the opportunity to get Diane's book, get it. And you can read her blogs. The group that named this one of the best breast cancer books ever was not kidding, ladies and gentlemen. You will be there. You'll experience it like you can't even imagine. It's a tremendous book. Well, we're just about out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank Diane one more time for this amazing story of recovery and reflection and redirection in health, and how she's changing what aerospace is going to be like. And she's doing this together. This is incredible. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what life throws at you, and you've heard today, life's going to throw a lot at you, please do three things. Look up, get up, never ever give up. Pick up the pieces and start moving forward, and better times and better people will come into your life. If you want more information about Diane, you can get it through her website, through her blogs, or you can contact me and I will make sure she gets any information you send. You can see this show on ROKU TV or on my YouTube page, Frank Zaccari. And when it goes public, I will be sending it to Diane. She'll post it in all the places that she puts out her information. If you use the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Now, let me leave you with this, ladies and gentlemen. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Diane showed us where many of those rocks are. Join me again next week. We talk about another life-altering event. Thank you very much.